The fourth Sunday of Lent. We're getting close to Easter. Jesus is talking to a group of people. Anyone remember who the group is? I'm sorry?
Pharisees and tax collectors.
He's talking to the Pharisees. He's also talking to tax collectors and sinners. Now, tax collectors, we know who they are. Tax collectors are appointed by Rome, and it's their job to collect what the emperor says they must collect. And they get their money by skimming it. So they're not considered to be friendly as far as the people are concerned, because they're constantly out trying to get the next set of taxes. Sinners. Now that's an interesting group. Who are sinners? Well, according to the Pharisees, sinners are anyone that do not believe and live the 350 commandments that the temple has established. So, if you don't live up to that expectation, you are a sinner. Now, there are all sorts of sinners. They're the ones that you would expect, those that are thieves, those that are beggars, those that are lower class, that don't have the money, or all their money's gone to paying taxes, so they can't pay the tax at the temple. So they would be considered sinners. So there are this group around Jesus. And then over in the corner, you know, when I talk about this one, I always think of one of the Disney movies. I think it might have been Snow White. No, it wasn't Snow White. There was a group of sort of 3 or 4 people dressed in dark clothes, and they kind of moved around all the time and always complained about things. And that's what this group was. This group was a group of complainers. Now, if you've ever taught, might be Sunday school, might be the fact you're taught at a university or a community college or a high school, if you've ever taught, there is nothing worse than trying to get your message across with a group over here complaining about something. I used to do a fair bit of lecturing at Fanshawe College when I was in London, and developmental services program. I'd be brought in 3 or 4 times a semester to talk about services that were being offered to individuals with developmental disabilities. And there was always 1 or 2 over in that corner that would not pay any attention when you were doing it. So you'd carry on, trying to carry on the conversation, and they're carrying on their conversation, like we're setting up a date for the night, or something like that. And you're trying to not lose your train of thought. And it's hard. It's really hard. And in Jesus' case, it was a group of Pharisees, and they were grumbling. And they were grumbling about the fact that, what's this man doing? Talking to these tax collectors and sinners. We won't even let them into the temple. They are that bad. We will not even let them into the temple. He's supposed to be a rabbi. He shouldn't be associating with this group. Now, if you remember back, Jesus ran into this once before with a group of Pharisees. And he said to them, look, a physician doesn't go to the well. A physician goes to the sick. And in this case, he was saying, I don't need to go to the righteous. They already know. They're already following the rules. I need to spend time with those that are breaking the rules. And then he tells a parable. Actually, there are 2 parables back to back. This is much like last week. Remember last week he did 2 stories back to back, trying to show his example. And we said that it's good advertising. We see the same TV commercial over and over and over again, And you either hate it or you love it. In our house, there's one that we turn off immediately. And it's one about a car where there's a whole band of kids playing, and they go into discord. And Fran just goes into absolute shock, and I quickly turn that down. And the minute that commercial's over, I flick it back up again. But it comes on regularly. I mean, I don't know. A lot of money goes into car advertising. Well, in this case, Jesus tells two stories back to back. He tells the story of the lost sheep, and he tells the story of the prodigal son. Both lost. Both lost. Now, what's about the sheep? Well, the sheep are used quite often throughout the Bible. Do we have anybody here has sheep on their farms or had sheep on their farms? If you've been to Scotland, you'll find that, and you get into the Highlands, the sheep are all over the place. They just roam on the road all the time, usually 2 or 3. Just stand there as you're driving along. Don't move. Just look at you with this nice, cute little face, chewing away. Not sure what they're chewing. I guess the grass from this side of the road that they still have in their mouth as they're walking across the road. The only problem is they don't walk. They just stand there and look. So you got to get out of the car, shoo them away, and then you get back in the car and you drive along, and another 15 or 20 miles or kilometers, there would be some more sheep. They are the dumbest animals, I think, in the world. Absolutely dumb. And Jesus uses them as an example of people. And that's the case in the other issues where the sheep turn up. Sheep are used to represent people. But they're dumb. They don't learn. They don't learn. So what happens in this story? Well, he has 100 sheep, and he loses one. Now, I've often wondered in this story, what happens to the 99 that he puts out in the clear land? Well, he goes looking for the one that's lost. When he comes back, there will likely be 82 because the rest have just wandered off. But as I read the different directions from the theologians, they suggest that if you had 100 sheep, you'd never have one shepherd. You'd always have a couple of shepherds. So there would be someone there to look after the 99 that remained behind. But the one shepherd would go out and find that lost sheep. And it suggested that it's a dangerous situation. The sheep gets down into a gully or something, and you've got to go down and get it and put it up over your shoulders and climb back. And when you come back, there is a great deal of rejoicing that you have all of your sheep together. Now, what's the parable? Well, the parable is that God does not leave any of his sheep. He goes out and finds anyone that's willing to come back to the master. It's a safe environment. And there are moments of great rejoicing. That's what we have to remember. There's if I can find it, I always have this problem when I try to use a quote. Stay with me. Actually, I can't seem to find it quickly. It's in Ezekiel. Here it is. The words found in chapter 34 of the book of Ezekiel. For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them. So will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they have scattered on the day of the clouds and darkness. I will search for the lost and I'll bring them back. I will shepherd the flock with justice. That's from an old-time prophet, way before the time of Jesus. But Jesus uses that experience, one that every Jew would know, a story of Ezekiel. And he uses that and puts it into what would be then modern day language and tells a story about a lost sheep. Now, it's interesting. Mission services, whether Presbyterian, United, Anglican, Catholic, mission services are likely the less group to be supported in the church. And whenever there are cuts, it's usually to the mission service projects. And yet, what does Jesus suggest to us? Jesus suggests that it's the lost sheep, those that have strayed away, that we should be spending our time with. It should be one of our highest priorities. And unfortunately, that's not what happens. If there's cuts at the national level, quite often it's from the missions group. Don't know why. It's an easy group. It's a group because they can't speak for themselves. We don't even have them in the flock at this point. So we have to advocate for them. I've told you in the past that I worked in a downtown church when I was about 19. First job I ever had, actually. I had an employment job on a full-time basis after school. And I was working as a youth leader. And I had two groups. I had my teeny boppers that came in on Thursday nights, and I had my seniors that came in on Friday nights, usually for dances and that sort of stuff. Back in those days, drugs were not an issue. Alcohol was the issue. And kids would find the most inventive ways of smuggling in drinks at our dances. I had to have at least 5 or 6 volunteers, and I drew from my youth group back in Scarborough. And they would come down on Friday nights, because Friday nights was the one that was always the problem when you had the 15, 16, 17-year-olds coming in for the dances. Back in those days, you had the high collars. You remember the high collars? The Don Cherry type of collars, with pink shirts and the black pants that were tight, and then they would flag out at the bottom sort of thing. And you think to yourself, there's no way these kids are coming in with any alcohol. Because we'd say to them, look, if you got any alcohol, there's a cupboard over there, put it up there. Don't want to go in during the dance. Pick it up on your way out. We weren't supposed to do that. That was against the law. But the only way you could sure the kids would come. And the youth bureau of the police department weren't great excited about that, but they knew what was going on. But I still had kids getting drunk. So we used to do a search of the girls' purses, because that was a great place to put them. They'd have these big purses, and nothing. We'd do a search of the water closet in the toilet to see whether there was a bottle stashed there, but no, couldn't find a bottle. But this one guy almost got. And what I found out at last was he had taken a catheter unit and strapped it to his pants down below the tight part, and ran a tube up to his high collar, and he'd go over to the end and rum and coke. Took me forever to find out what was going on with that. But we made some great inroads, Inroads, thank you. Some great inroads with some of those young people. Almost every one of them came from a broken home. Every one of them would sit around and talk about the uncle that was visiting this week, or the uncle that had visited last week. It was a great group of kids to work with. Why am I bringing this up? It was only the church that was a safe haven for them. If I'd left them alone, they would have been on the street Friday night. They would have joined the Ontario Street Gang, which was across Parliament, which was a feeder group for the Cross Gang, which was the big adult gang that handled the downtown core of Toronto. But by keeping them involved Friday night, and I don't know what they did Saturday night. I do because I was out on the streets at that time, walking the streets, trying to keep track of some of these kids. But that the church was investing. They were investing a whole $3,500 a year on my salary for me to spend time making contact with these kids, trying to encourage them to stay in school, trying to show them that if they were abused at home, that there were options for them. There were things that could be done. A book had come out about 2 or 3 years earlier. Maybe some of you had read it. It was called Cross and the Switchblade. It was from Chicago in the downtown core, and it was a youth worker, in this case a minister, and his experiences. And I read that, and I thought, that's great. That's what I wanted to do. So that's why I signed up with the United Church and worked for a year down in the downtown core. You know, but when a 12-year-old came in and told me she was pregnant, I didn't quite know where to go, what to do. So I went down the street to Regent Park North United Church. Minister there was a guy by the name of Bob Lindsay. He wasn't my supervisor. My supervisor was at 85 St. Clair, which was the national headquarters for the United Church of Canada. And I sat down with Bob and I said, Bob, I don't know. I don't know what to do for this young lady. And we chatted for a few minutes and he said, now here are some options. And he gave me some options. And I brought Elizabeth back in and we sat down and we chatted. I said, do your parents know? Well, she only had a mom at home. She said, I can't tell her. So I've got to take off. I said, well, you can't take off at 12. You can't live on the street. You can't do that. Let's get you set up with some services. And because of Bob, I was able to introduce her to some services that she could use and help her. Help her explain to her mother what had happened. Have her mother there to support her during the pregnancy. Have the Children's Aid Society available to support her at the time of birth. Mother did not want the child. Now, when I say mother, I mean Elizabeth's mother did not want the child in the home. So we had to find ways for this child to be put up for adoption. It was an interesting experience, and I grew from it. And I realized very quickly that I wasn't qualified to work in the downtown core, that I needed more training. And it was through that experience that I decided to go back to Ryerson to take some courses in social services. I enjoyed that time down there. I had to be involved in a service of a 14-year-old girl that died of cancer, leukemia. For a person that was 19, these were major growing experiences. Major growing experiences. But I did have a strong belief in my God. I had strong support from a group back in Scarborough that was my young people's group, who would drive in to the downtown core to support me in some of the efforts I was doing. A group that had opened up in the basement of a suburban church, a coffee house called Herm's Hideaway. We opened it up on a Friday night. We brought in local talent, folk singers from around Scarborough. And then over the years, 2 or 3 years, we got so big that we started bringing in singers from Buffalo and other places because we were raising money out of this. It was doing really quite well. We basically priced ourselves out of the market. But any money that we made went into trips up to Perry Island, a reserve for the First Nations, where we developed a group of young people that would play floor hockey or baseball with the youth up there, as we would take our 20 or 30 young people up in our cars, pay for the gas, pay for the food. And that's where I learned my experience, and I wanted to share it as I went down into the inner city. We don't spend enough time trying to find ways of getting people out of poverty. There are ways. There's a game that we used to play in our course in social services called the Ghetto. And it was a social manipulation game. And the only way you could get out of the ghetto, it was a board game. And you had like a Monopoly, you had chance cards and that sort of stuff. Every time you started to get out of the ghetto, you would end up being fined for something, or being sent to jail, or going into the cycle, losing your child, those sorts of things. But if you could get into a school and continue on your education, you could actually win the game. It was a fascinating game. A lot of time went into the research of it. There are ways that we can help people move out of the ghetto. Jesus showed it to us today. You have to be where the people are. You have to be there. Operation Sharing is the next example in our area, where people are there to support and help people find ways out of the ghetto. Jesus said that when the first person comes out of the ghetto, in this case, finds God, there is great rejoicing. There's a party. When the prodigal son comes home, after all he had experienced, his father throws him a huge party of celebration. The dead has arrived. He has arisen. We take for granted, because we're so used to the group that we're here, that this is who make up the church. It's not. The church isn't this building. The church is wherever God's people are. It's up to us to find ways. And we do that through our support of mission services as one of the ways. We've done that by taking on other projects, supporting those that were in Ukraine. But it's not a one-time shot. It should be part of our lifestyle. And it's something we all, me in particular, have to work on. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.